All right, so a few years ago, I came across a group that they were in Gillette, Wyoming, when Gillette has, I call it the Gillette Mall. And you're thinking Gillette doesn't have a mall. No, but they open up their Camplex now and then and let a bunch of vendors in there. It's the best, it's the closest they come. And one of the booths there was a group called Wyoming Normal. Now, the Normal organization is actually nationwide. This is the Wyoming group, and they went around getting petitions signed to try to get the legislators to talk about legalizing marijuana, and not just medical marijuana, but just in general legalizing marijuana in the state of Wyoming. So, of course, I've had them on a couple of times now just to talk about their point of view, but I'm thinking, other than the callers, is there any organized effort out there on the other side of the equation? Well, finally found him. Smart Approach to Marijuana, SAM. And on the phone is Dr. Kevin Sabet with me right now. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. So, SAM, is it a national organization or a Wyoming organization, or a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
We're a national nonprofit, and we have affiliates all over the country, and we do work in Wyoming. We're running some digital ads right now just to kind of get people to understand that today's pot is not your granddaddy's weed. It's totally different.
Okay.
And, you know, we don't want people in prison. This isn't about infringing on individual rights. I really could care less if an adult smokes a joint now and again. That's not the issue. The issue is really the commercialization of very high-potent THC marijuana. THC is what gets you high. And these candies and cookies and chocolates and edibles and ice creams, these are targeting our kids. They're making us, frankly, a lot dumber. We're less likely to compete in the world, and it's just, I don't see how it's benefiting anybody except those selling it.
Okay, so to me, so let's clarify a little bit. There's a bit of a mixed message here, because on one hand, you don't mind people doing it, you've said, but if you don't mind that, then you would have to legalize it, wouldn't you?
Not really. You could decriminalize use. You could grow your own. I mean,
I got you.
You know, people get it from friends and family. I don't think necessarily it's a great thing for people to be stoned all the time.
Right,
but again, we're not looking to put people in prison. We're not about infringing on individual rights.
So then how would you handle, because I take a look at, a few states, even right below our border, Colorado, I mean, they've legalized there, and here come the stores. So are you saying then if somebody wanted to have, let's say, a little bit of a plant in their backyard and they occasionally rolled one on their back porch, you don't have a problem, but what you have a problem is with the candy store?
I have a problem with the stores. I have a problem with the fact that Big Tobacco, Altria, our old friends at Philip Morris, they have bought $4 billion worth of pot businesses. I worry about the alcohol industry getting involved, and I worry about our kids. I mean, this is just, it can lower IQ by 8 points. It significantly increases the incidence of mental illness, including psychosis, schizophrenia, depression, and anxiety, and God knows we have enough of that in society as it is. I just don't see how we as a society really benefit from more people stoned.
Okay, so devil's advocate with you then. And I'm not taking sides in this. I'm just giving you devil's advocate. So, there are those people who are going to say, well, wait a minute now. There are people who have some benefits because they're on medications for various things. And it even includes some emotional disorders. And this has a calming effect. And for that matter, what's the difference between that and somebody getting drunk on a Friday night?
Well, 2 shots of whiskey for some people can have a calming effect too. We don't call it medicine.
Okay.
Look, there are. Let me be very clear.
Wait a second. Sorry. Grandma calls that medicine. Just so you know. Okay.
I know. I understand. Yeah. I talk to people all the time. But let me tell you what I would tell Grandma. First of all, if Grandma has 6 months to live and terminal cancer, I don't care if she wants to use meth, let alone marijuana. So I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
The issue isn't about people with 6 months to live or whatnot. The issue is medicine. There are medicinal components of marijuana. Let me be very clear. I'm not saying there are none. There are components of marijuana that are medicinal. It gets a little complicated, but those components can be isolated into actual, medicinal products. So in other words, whether it's a pill, we already have it by the FDA, whether it's an oil they call it CBD oil for kids with seizures, that's also approved by the FDA. I have no problem with that. My problem is when an 18-year-old with quote-unquote stress and a headache can walk into a pot shop with a guy that doesn't even have a GED, let alone a medical degree, and says, oh, this is medicine. Or in Colorado, they're recommending it to pregnant women. for nausea, and we know how much it actually hurts the developing fetus. It can be fatal. So, it's really a balance.
Okay, so for those who just joined us, website is learnaboutSam.org. I'm talking to Kevin Sabet about legalizing marijuana in states like Wyoming. Okay, so let's say it will happen. Here comes the next round of legalized marijuana in the state of Wyoming. If you were to craft legislation, would it be absolutely nothing, no, or would it be okay, we'll legalize it, but? In other words, exactly what does it look like for a state like Wyoming?
Yeah. I think it looks like let's slow down a little bit. Let's research so we kind of know what we're getting ourselves into, because marijuana needs to be researched a lot more too, frankly. I mean, we're walking into this. It increases the incidence of car crashes and accidents, and yet we are still learning about what it does to people when they drive. So here's how I would do it. I would, first of all, say zero tolerance for driving. We do not want people on the road. Colorado has seen a skyrocketing number of car crashes related to marijuana. We don't want that. So I would do that. I would do research the medical aspects, but I would also have an awareness campaign for young people, because young people think it's good for you. How can something be bad for you if it's medicine, right? If it's good for you. So young people are thinking this is no big deal, and they're using marijuana at record levels. And again, not your daddy's marijuana, 99% THC concentrate. That is compared to 4% Woodstock weed. It's totally a different drug. I would do an awareness campaign. I would research it more. I would go a lot slower. I'd get tough on the drivers. And for those with, again, 6 months to live and terminal cancer, I don't know a cop in Wyoming or Texas or anywhere who frankly would want to arrest that person anyway. So I really, wish them the best.
Well, here's where you and I'll finally throw my opinion in here. You and I have an agreement on this. Because as far as I'm concerned, I take a look at enforcement. Just so you know, I have never been drunk or stoned a day in my life. I've always had more interesting things to do. Every time it was offered
to me. That's why you're so successful.
Yeah, every time something was offered to me, I had something that I was doing that was far more interesting than watching the walls melt. So no, thank you. So I just never got involved in it. Now, having said that, when I take a look at marijuana prohibition across the nation, I think it is a 100% failure. We're spending billions of dollars every year, incarcerating all sorts of people, and yet, you can even get a joint in prison. So when I see a drug-free school zone, I laugh, because where do you learn about pot, for Pete's sake? So obviously that's not working. Now, I go and take a look at my parents' generation. They came right out of the Great Depression into World War II and find someone who didn't smoke cigarettes. But now the number of smokers has been astronomically reduced, and it's been because of education. So what I would do is just legalize it across the board and spend a fraction of that money that we use on incarceration and arresting people on education, and we might actually have an impact on how many people use it. You'll never get to zero, by the way.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you about never getting to zero. Let me unpack that for a little bit.
Sure.
It's a fascinating thing what you said. It's very intelligent. Let me unpack that a little bit. First of all, I agree with you. It's a waste of resources to throw people in prison for pot or give them a criminal arrest record that prevents them from really being a contributing member to society and hurts their chances of success in the future, because they're scrapped with an arrest record. They can't get a job. They can't go to school. Unless they're rich, they can get a good lawyer to get it off the sit, but otherwise they can't do it. And so I agree with you. That's actually a waste of resources. But let's unpack that a little bit. When you look at the statistics, our prisons are actually not full of people whose only crime was a small possession of marijuana. There are plenty of people smoking marijuana, and the majority of prisoners have used marijuana, and maybe they even had marijuana on them at the time of their crime. But their crime was a lot more serious. That being said, I'm not discounting the waste in the criminal justice system. I think we do waste a lot of money. I think we need to reform probation. That's maybe a separate conversation. We need to have drug courts. We need to have treatment on demand. We need to do a lot of things to help our incarceration, which I totally agree with you, we spend too much money on. But marijuana isn't really, to be honest, I've studied this 25 years, it's not really where the action is at. It is in terms of arrest. We do arrest a lot of people, and like I said, that does result in time and money, and I agree with you. Let's not arrest them. Let's treat it like a speeding ticket. Let's treat it, you can be creative. It's not, you get an arrest record in life in prison, or it's, free, here's a pot shop on your corner. There's a lot of options there. So I think it's a bit of a false dichotomy to say criminalization or legalization. The other thing I would say with what you said, because it was very good too, great observation, was about tobacco. You're 100% right. We've reduced tobacco dramatically, but let's think about how we got there. First of all, it took us 100 years to wake up from the propaganda of big tobacco that had told us for so long how great it was and how it wasn't addictive.
Hell.
And
magazine and television commercials with doctors in lab coats smoking cigarettes saying it's good for you.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I even in my slide presentation I show some of those old ads that people get a kick out of it. Kids today think I'm making it up. They can't believe that was a real thing. When I tell a kid that you used to be able to smoke in an airplane, they think I'm lying to them. They don't. They cannot believe it.
Well, I give an example.
But how did we get there?
I was looking at some old, real quick on the side, some old airplanes, private airplanes, like little four-seater things from like movies from back in the '60s. They had ashtrays in them. Inside
of course,
those,
of course they did.
Yeah,
absolutely they did. And even some of the old planes, even as recently as a number of years ago, the old 747, 757 still have the old ashtrays.
Absolutely.
But the point is, right? How did we? That was a dramatic change. But how did it happen? It wasn't just education. That was part of it because we were very smart with that. But it was also the lawsuits and really, frankly, the body count. I mean, people were like, "Whoa, wait a minute! This is killing 500,000 people a year." And so we had to kind of learn the hard way. But and I have a little caveat to that, which which is very interesting. We'll talk about in a second. But we had to learn it the hard way, and I don't want to learn this by a bunch of kids in a school bus getting in a fatal car crash because their driver was stoned and thought it was no big deal. I don't want to learn it that way. I want us to I think we can learn from our mistakes and learn from our past and not repeat history. The other thing I would tell you is that the other reason cigarettes. I mean, there's such a stigma on smoking. When you look at smokers, and you don't even know where they can smoke anymore. I mean, we have completely changed the way that we treat smokers and smoking. We have the opposite right now with marijuana. Marijuana is so accepted in many of our cities and places. The smell, go to Denver. I mean, it's so accepted. So we're nowhere near that negative environment.
Isn't it interesting?
If you could bring me that negative environment, maybe I would sign up with you.
Isn't it interesting that you can?
Me that environment.
If you walk down the street smoking a cigarette in some cities, you get in big trouble. But if you walk down the street smoking a joint, you're fine.
That makes no sense. That makes no sense. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Okay, well let's wrap it up.
I want to be sensible. Let's wrap it up. I want to be sensible, and let's not forget that big tobacco, by the way, is making all the money back in vaping. Maybe that's another show.
Well,
but they're not losing money.
Well, there you go. Tobacco wants to get into, like you said, marijuana. They've been buying it up, so they look at this as a possible future market as it gets legalized. And Canada right now is leading the way as far as an entire nation.
Yeah.
So, okay, you've been very interesting. I want to have you back on this, so let's make sure to keep in touch. But for those people who need to know more about you, website and where do they chat with you?
They go to learnaboutsam.org. We have a Wyoming chapter. We're starting with education because we know the Colorado business moguls see Wyoming as one of their next business places, and we want to kind of avoid that. And so they can go to learnaboutsam.org. We're also on Facebook, Sam Wyoming.
Okay. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.